Hey everybody, this is your host, The On Fire Show, with your host, Daryl McHale Brooks. This is The On Fire Show. I'd like to thank you all for watching. And waiting for Mr. Michael Rectenwald, professor at NYU. He's the head of global, he's a professor of global studies at NYU. He's going to talk about some of the things that are happening, and we're going to have a great time. We're going to talk about cultural Marxism. We're going to talk about Marxism. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're waiting for Mr. Michael Rectenwald, professor at NYU. And he said, go ahead and invite him. I have sent, okay. You were, Mr. Rectenwald, you have an invite. I sent you the invite, and I'm waiting for you to come on, invite. And all you got to do is type. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to bring you on camera. There you go. All right, I'm adding Mr. Michael Rectenwald, professor at NYU, head of Department of Global Studies. He teaches global studies. And we're waiting for him to come on. Boy, this is like, this has been so exciting. It's been crazy.
Leave it like that.
Wow. You're finally here.
Gosh. My goodness, excuse me. I had no idea that I had to be on the phone.
Yeah, this is all right. Are you there?
Yeah, can you see me?
Yeah, I can see
you.
All right, great. All right, so now let's start invite some people to watch here.
All right.
All right. So. Okay.
All right. Good?
So how you doing?
Well, I'm better now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. You know, I didn't believe that you were. I didn't know you were using your laptop. Now you're using your phone.
Yeah, I don't have a touchscreen laptop either, so I couldn't do it. Yeah, I had no idea what was the matter.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
You know, some of the most interesting things when I was watching
The Blaze, and I saw Glenn Beck interview. I said, wow, you have an interesting life, and what has happened to you at NYU was so interesting. And also you have a book, Springtime in Snowflakes.
Springtime for Snowflakes,
yes.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about
yourself and who you are. If you can let everybody know who's watching, who are you? Who are you?
My name is Michael Rectenwald, and I got a long story, but I'll make it short, I guess. I'm a professor at NYU. You know, I'm a writer, and I write all kinds of things. I write poetry, I write fiction, I write academic writing, essays, scholarship, and then recently a popular book on my own situation, a memoir. I'm a professor at NYU. I hold a PhD in Literary and Cultural Studies from Carnegie Mellon University, a master's in English from Case Western, and a BA in English from the University of Pittsburgh. I've written 8 books, two books of poetry, a book of short stories, 2 books of scholarship, a textbook, writing around the curriculum textbook, and my latest Springtime for Snowflakes, a memoir about my academic life and what's happened to me at NYU.
Okay, so people are saying there's like 3 echoes. They can hear echoes. Do you have any kind of devices on?
Yeah, let me shut down my laptop's on, but I'll turn it off.
Okay.
I don't think it's making any sound, but I'll shut it down. Hopefully that helps.
Yes. Okay. So when I was watching the Glenn Beck show, and the Blaze talked about your activity back in, I guess, when you started in Marxism, and we talked about cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
And your transformation.
Yeah.
And tell me about the transformation from Marxism to the whole thing of liberalism, and what are you doing now?
Yeah. So it's a real long story. I mean, I was, for a good while, I was like a radical liberal activist, like a leftist Democrat, who did activism. And for example, in 2000, when I thought that the election between Gore and Bush was stolen for Bush, I started a group called Citizens for Legitimate Government in order to oppose Bush and to expose the election fraud. So I became a liberal activist, and I became a liberal pundit on TV. I was on Scarborough Country, Joe Scarborough's show many times, and other shows on MSNBC before they leaned forward. Then, when Obama became president, I actually became more radical, especially after he he went along with Bush's bailout of the financial industry. I thought this is a sure sign that he wasn't what he said he was. And I became even more radicalized and became a Marxist. I started off by flirting with the Trotskyist sect, and then soon came to identify as a left communist, which is a form of communism that rejects Bolshevism and the bureaucratic state set up in the Soviet Union and China, and basically any sort of what they call tankies, or anybody that's down for Stalin and Mao. And I wrote a lot of essays on Marxism about many different topics, including economy, identity politics, the singularity, or the technological point at which humans would be surpassed by computer intelligence, and many other things. And I was basically a well-regarded leftist and communist commentator and writer, all the while doing my other academic work. And then in the fall of 2016 at NYU, I noticed some really disturbing trends. The introduction of what I would call social justice as policy in the university. They introduced what they called a bias reporting hotline, where people could report biases against, if they've suffered from or they noticed a bias infraction, they could report it to this central authority. And then also these trigger warnings on syllabus, to warn students about disturbing material, and safe spaces for people to hide so they weren't subjected to talk or ideas that they didn't like. And then what's called the no platforming of speakers, all these speakers shut down. I thought this was, crazy, so I started to tweet about it. I started a Twitter account called anti-PC-NYU-Prof, and I started tweeting criticisms of all this. Within a very short time, I was discovered by a reporter of the student newspaper at NYU who interviewed me. I went on the record as myself critiquing social justice ideology in the university and political correctness and what it was doing to the university. I thought restricting inquiry, shutting down free thought, shutting down speech, and so on and so forth. And within 2 days, I was condemned by a committee calling themselves the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group, and I was put on a paid medical leave, effective immediately.
Mm-hmm. So basically, was it the point of someone outed you out, or they basically didn't like what you're standing on social justice?
Well, the reporter offered me anonymity, but I decided to go out on the record as myself. But once I did, I was condemned roundly by these social justice warriors in my department, who went after me viciously, and they acted like I was a Nazi or something, just because I criticized identity politics, social justice, trigger warnings, safe spaces, and things like this. I mean, they attacked me like they criminalized me, in effect.
So tell the audience who's watching, tell us about our identity politics and what does that, what that does to politics in America.
What it does is, it's a way of suggesting that someone's politics should necessarily be connected to their identity, and therefore that whatever they believe is something has to do with their identity group, which I think is very limiting, not only for the people in that identity group who are supposed to have certain ideas based on what their phenotype is, then it also limits any kinds of collectivity between people across different groups. So that, you know, for example, you and I are not supposed to have the same political ideas, and because we're different identity groups. And so I think it consigns people and constrains them to particular political positions based on identity, and then expects them to behave accordingly. And I was, for example, I was condemned because as a white male, I was not supposed to be stating the things that I was saying. I was not allowed to say them because.
Hello? Hi, this is the On Fire Show with the host, Daryl McKell Brooks. We're waiting to get back from Michael Rectenwald. Interesting professor at NYU, teaches global studies. And we're waiting for him to come back on. I think with some technical difficulties we were having. And he's talking about NYU. He's talking about some of the problems he's had. He has a book called Springtime in Snowflakes. He's talking about social justice. He's talking about Marxism. We're going to have a talk about cultural Marxism. We're going to talk about his lawsuit with NYU, and a lot of different subjects we're going to be talking about. So just stay tuned. I'm waiting for Mr. Michael Rectenwald from NYU University, professor of global studies. Hey, Culture Freedom, how you doing? Okay, I'm gonna try to invite. All right, you're gonna sit here and invite Mr. Rectenwald again. Okay. I think there was some technical difficulties we were having.
Okay, here I am again, I think.
All right. So, talk about global studies. What is global studies?
Well,
You're a professor of global studies.
Yeah, it's actually global liberal studies. So while global studies is the study of like global politics, global liberal studies is a cultural study. It's like a study of cultures, global cultures or cultures in various parts of the globe. It's like humanity. It's like a liberal arts education globalized in effect, so that you study not just the texts and the cultures of your own. Like English literature would study only English literature, writing by people from, the speaking English, but you study cultures all over the world. It's a very difficult enterprise to undertake because nobody can do it sufficiently. So you have to have a lot of professors, and we have like over 100 professors teaching different things. And I've been teaching there for 10 years. I'm on my 11th year.
Yeah. So one of the things that people when I sent the invite out, people sent me invites. The last show you had posted, they wanted to ask me a couple of questions.
Sure.
And the idea of Marxism.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between Marxism and cultural Marxism?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so Marxism is mostly an economic theory, although it is about transforming the entire society and the whole social order based on an economic, based on a dramatic economic change. Marxism is based on the notion that there are basically two main classes in society, the working class and the capitalist class. According to Marxist theory, the capitalist class owns all of the means of production, and the working class has no choice but to work for a capitalist of one sort or another. According to Marxism, the working class is exploited by the capitalist class. That is, their labor is not fully compensated for. Part of their labor is siphoned off by the capitalists. Part of the product of their labor, called surplus value, is siphoned off by the capitalists and taken from the worker so that he's not or she's not fully reimbursed for her labor. So the Marxist idea is to overthrow capitalism through a revolution, and to take over the state as well, to overthrow the state and the economic base of society. Now, cultural Marxism came about roughly in the 40s, and mostly associated with a group called the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, based in Frankfurt, Germany. There were Jewish intellectuals and Marxists who basically gave up on the working class as the agent of making change in the social order and overthrowing capitalism, because they saw that many workers, for example, especially in the United States, did not seem to be disposed to any revolutionary ends. They were more interested in doing well as they could, and even sharing some of the consumption patterns of the so-called capitalist enemies. So instead, they decided that the way to change the social order was through cultural means, through, for example, to undermine the kind of ideological indoctrination that was supposedly going on through the media, by the capitalist class using mass media to try to basically reverse what they called the hegemonic cultural or dominating cultural, the domination of culture by the capitalist class, and get it into the hands of other peoples. So,
okay. The question, does cultural Marxism stand against the foundation of America, Christianity?
Well, I mean, yes,
Americanism?
if you get into the depths of what cultural Marxism wants to do, you have to agree that it's aiming at eroding and taking every social structure that is existing, and dismantling it entirely, including not only the culture industries and putting it in the hands of workers and letting them dominate, but also undermining things like the family, undermining almost every institution in society, if not all of them. Yeah, completely eroding all of the structures. Anything that stands has to be undone. You know, as Marx put it, it's a ruthless criticism of everything existing. And that includes the family. I mean, the abolition of the family, though, goes all the way back to the Communist Manifesto in 1848, where Marx and Engels said they wanted to get rid of the family entirely. The family stands against the state. It is a bulwark that has power that the state does not want it to have in controlling people's lives. Yeah. So everything, yes. And the U.S. Constitution to a Marxist is just a piece of paper that needs shredded. It is they look at the American Revolution as a quote unquote bourgeois revolution, in which basically the middle classes, in conjunction with some aristocrats, basically established a state that benefits the capitalist class. They would get rid of it entirely.
Well, when we talk about cultural Marxism, we're looking at some of the things that especially took place in the 1960s. The Vietnam War, protests, feminism, drug use.
Yes.
So how did cultural Marxism play a role in the whole 60s movement?
Well, that's a very interesting question. To some extent, the cultural revolution that was taking place in the 60s was partly a diversion of real political energy away from politics and into cultural areas. For example, it is fairly well documented that the CIA had something to do with the dissemination of LSD amongst the left. and they tried to use LSD to disorient the left away from politics and into just getting high. So there is some part of the cultural Marxism that is revolutionary, and some of it was actually diversionary. So it's not all, it isn't all the part, something that the cultural Marxists envision. In fact, some of it is a deflection away from that. Although, for the most part, you could say the Cultural Revolution in the United States paralleled the Cultural Revolution in China. It just had a different mode of operation, and it didn't have the thoroughness that they had in China, for example, where Mao literally told the students and others that they had total permission to rip down everything in society. Everything historical, all statues, churches, any monuments to any historical anything historical, they had the perfect permission to destroy it. So this was sort of taken up in a softer form in the U.S., where they were trying to take apart the U.S. Traditional society in the United States.
Let's talk near 2018.
Yeah,
I met with some preachers, and I think I had a discussion with you. I met with some preachers, and they could not understand what was taking place in the society.
yeah.
With the whole thing of men dressing up like girls, girls dressing up like boys.
Yeah.
The whole thing of transgenderism,
Right.
transsexualism. They're lost.
Yeah.
Of what they're seeing.
Yeah.
And also when you look at the radio stations, the TV shows, the talk shows, the movies that are out, the
Right.
violent, crazy video games.
Yep.
They don't understand what's happening in 2018.
I can tell you.
Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. I talk a lot about this in my book, Springtime for Snowflakes. Springtime for Snowflakes, which is a book that explains where this social justice ideology comes from and what it's about. And the idea of transgenderism, as I've traced it to postmodern theory, in which it is believed that language or language determines reality. Okay, that language is what makes reality what it is, okay? It's called social and linguistic constructionism. And what they mean by that is that, for example, something like gender is not a given by nature. It is rather a social product that is largely performed, and also that is constructed through language. So that for the people on the so-called gender spectrum, they believe that whatever they say they are, that's what they are. That their language and their naming of themselves as such is determining, and the underlying genetics and biology and anatomy and hormonal reality does not matter. It is completely overwritten by what they believe to be the truth about themselves. And this all comes from postmodern theory, in which subjectivism, or the notion that reality is based on my subjective experience, is not something objectively given, but that as a person I have a subjective truth, and that truth is my truth that you can't know and you can't change and you can't deny. Everybody has their own truth. So this subjectivism allows people to pretend that whatever they think is true is true. This goes so far as to, you won't believe the outlandish length this has gone to. For example, at Google, where James Damore, the guy that was fired for making claims that there was a difference between men and women in terms of career ambitions, he was fired, and they showed in the court documents that there are people at Google, there's one person that identifies as a wingless dragonfly kin and an elaborate ornate building. That's their identity. Okay, so people are believing they can just, by virtue of saying whatever they want, that's what they are, so that, your genitals, your anatomy, your chromosomes, XX or XY, mean nothing, because it's all socially constructed.
No question. You know, we're in 2018, and I do a lot of research about our educational system. Does our educational system play a role when you have kids that are graduating from the 12th grade with the 5th grade, 4th grade reading level, math level, do that whole society of television, media, TV, media, video games, talk shows.
Yeah.
And the kids of this generation are less educated, are willing to accept talk show, late night talk shows.
Mm-hmm.
Does all this play a role in the thinking of how these young generations think?
Let me just say this. From K through the PhD, our entire educational system has been entirely permeated and infiltrated and thoroughly taken over by what I call social justice ideology. And that includes transgenderism. It includes these notions of cultural appropriation, these ideas of mansplaining, of privilege and privilege checking, the whole identity politics gamut, all these ideas that I might have my own truth and you have your own truth, and you can't tell me my truth is not true, and you can't know what I know because I'm who I am. All this stuff is all based on postmodern theory, and it's social justice ideology, which has its roots in postmodern theory. It has permeated every level of the education system because all of the teachers, K through PhD, have been indoctrinated by this and into this system in the colleges and universities. They go back to these schools and they then institute it in these schools, such that in kindergarten, students are now going to class and having what they call transition parties, in which their friend or maybe they themselves are transitioning from one gender to another, and it's celebrated in the public school system, and this is supposed to be normal. This is all going on a regular basis, and it's social justice university, but it's also social justice kindergarten, it's social justice K through 12, it's social justice everywhere, and it's completely based on the total indoctrination of the teaching staff through many years of leftist control of the universities. Right now, the left has absolute and total control of the entire educational system, all the way from K through the PhD.
So what could be done about this? I mean, where's the pushback, the fight?
Great idea. One of the things that I've suggested is, just as the beginning, is this. It has to be noted that social justice ideology is a religion. Okay, I have nothing against religions per se, but this is a very bad religion. Furthermore, it is a religion that has been adopted by public schools, which is a violation of the separation of church and state. So if we can, I can tell you that we can nail it as a religion because it is based on beliefs and ritual, okay? Nothing else, not knowledge, not empirical evidence, nothing. It's based on beliefs and ritual and routines. If we can show that it's a religion and then bring cases against it as a violation of church and state in the public school, then we'll go a long way in forcing its retreat, okay? And the same thing is true in the university. If we can show these universities that they have officially adopted a set of policies that are religious in nature, that they are becoming social justice religious schools rather than either secular schools or in some cases Catholic and Christian schools. This has taken over Catholic schools, Catholic universities, and Christian universities without them knowing what's going on, because the term social justice sounds so wonderful. It must be good. Who could be against that? But it's like a Trojan horse, and inside that Trojan horse are all kinds of weapons to deconstruct and take apart the whole society.
Mm-hmm. So talk about television. The news.
Yeah, the news.
You know, one of the things, when I guess it was Bruce Jenner turned himself into Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah.
And the ESPY Awards, and he won the Arthur Ashe Award.
And Woman of the Year.
Yeah. there were people that questioned it, challenged it. And they are now saying, they were saying, well, Bruce Jenner's Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah.
So it's wrong to question or challenge these issues.
Right. What they do is this. They shame you and smear you for being a bigot and a transphobe, and then it makes you look like you're some sort of a Neanderthal, you know, like a dinosaur, if you oppose this, because everything new must be good, right? I don't think so. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's good. See, we got to get this across. Just because something is at the cutting edge doesn't mean it's good. For example, I could be at the cutting edge of leading a troop of people at the cutting edge, but we're standing on the edge of a cliff. And if we go any further, we're going off the cliff. That's not good. So things that are new are not necessarily good. That has to be gotten across. And yes, what they have done is to make anybody who opposes this idea of transgenderism as totally acceptable look like a bigot, you know, and is comparable to a racist and is therefore demonized. And then they're shamed out of existence. So you can't point out that you are not allowed to say, I don't believe that you're a woman, you know, based on, because you say you are. You know, if the sun suddenly announced that it was the moon, you know, and it was still shining every day like it does, I wouldn't say it was the moon. Okay, sure, you're the moon. You can't just change on your being like that. It's not possible. So, yeah, transgenderism, and this is not to say one is a transphobe, because you could treat people with the proper dignity and respect and equal rights that they deserve, regardless of what they say. But that doesn't mean you have to believe what they say. There's a difference between having, treating people with equality, with dignity, with respect, and not discriminating against them, which I am, absolutely against discrimination in any form. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we have to go along with everything the person says. We're not going to let schizophrenics determine the laws of the United States, are we? I mean, just because they say this and that about, they have these delusions or whatever. I mean, we're not going to take that into consideration in our policies, but we're doing that with transgenderism.
Now, let's go to another subject. Let's talk about springtime and snowflakes.
Springtime for snowflakes.
Springtime for snowflakes.
Yeah.
When did you decide to really write this book?
After the spring of 2017, after I'd gone through all this hell at NYU, being crucified in effect, metaphorically for going against these trends, and then I was attacked in a series of emails by so-called colleagues in my faculty that called me every name in the book, from racist, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, transphobe, the devil, Satan, everything you can imagine. When I've never exhibited any such behavior or attitudes in my life. They called me all these names even while they were being sexist and racist towards me. I decided I was going to go out and put a book out about all this stuff, and so I did. And then, in consultation with a really good editor, I decided that I would make it a history of my own encounters with the postmodern theoretical basis of all this stuff, and that's what it is.
Okay, go ahead.
So, the spring of 2017, I had it written by the end of the summer.
Okay, and how's it going?
It sold very well. At one point, it broke into the top 100 on Amazon.com out of all books on Amazon, which is really amazing. I mean, there's 15 million books sold on Amazon, and it was rated at number 68 at one point.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it's had some really good sales. I've had some good exposure. I've been on Fox News 3 times. I've been on with Glenn Beck, as you mentioned. I've been on numerous shows like yours and others, and just it's been word of mouth because the book has a reputation of doing something that hasn't been done and that needs to be said. What is you said people, ministers, and others are trying to figure out what is going on here. Well, this book explains what's going on here, where these ideas come from, and how to combat them.
When I talk to some pastors, and I mentioned the word cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
they basically they never heard of it.
Yeah.
And so when they know that something is happening,
Right.
they know that something's going totally wrong.
Right.
And so they're trying, they preach on it, say it's sin, but they don't have a name for it.
Sure.
And so one of the things I like to talk to you about is would you ever love to come to the city of Trenton, New Jersey and talk to some preachers?
Oh, I'd love that. Absolutely. I'd relish the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I got my buddy John Robert Carmen, head of the Constitutional Republicans in New Jersey. Yeah, he talks to me. I'm talking about cultural Marxism.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to come and talk about these ideas and, this very nefarious or very negative and terrible thing that's passing under the name of social justice, which sounds wonderful to everybody who could be against it. But, these noble abstract terms oftentimes are harboring some very pernicious and devilish things underneath. And that's the case here. I'm all for civil rights, that kind of social justice, but this is about new things like new identities and new genders and new types of weird criminal behavior that we're supposedly undertaking without knowing it, and convicting us of this and that and the other thing, and condemning us for being behind this and that and the other thing, for being, whatever they can find wrong with you, they'll do it. And they pile on. You see this stuff happening on the internet where people are attacked by Twitter storms of, trolls that just go wild on them for saying something wrong. This is happening all over the culture, shaming people into silence and oblivion in some cases. Terrible. And that, speaking from a religious standpoint of Christianity, these people are Pharisees of the worst type. They're always running around virtue signaling about how wonderfully moral they are, and then they go on the attack and destroy people's lives.
One of the things we're going to talk about now is your lawsuit at NYU. How's that going?
Well, there were two prongs to it. One was the defamation, which refers to those, emails that were sent through official NYU email servers, in which I was, dragged through the mud for things that I'd never done, said, or been associated with, total lies and defamation. And it turns out that the hurdles in winning a case like that, the thing is, we found out is the crazier the things they say about you, the more difficult it is to pin them with defamation. And so we basically dropped that, but there's still the discrimination case, which we're looking at pursuing. I have the right to sue in the state of New York for discrimination over the way I was treated. For example, I was the one attacked, and yet I had to leave the office and get moved into the Russian department. They pushed me out of the main building and into the margins, and completely shunned and completely marginalized, and they completely treat me like I'm a non-person. So I've been deeply discriminated against in the university just for being having a different view, and I've never done anything policy-wise that's wrong. Nothing.
Yeah, I definitely understand, and I sympathize with you. I even to the point is that what is happening in our society with other ones like you who've spoken out. You look at history of activists, political activists, social activists. You go back to Martin Luther King time, and he was talked about and criticized, watched by the FBI, military, and how he must feel when he spoke the truth.
He was speaking the truth too, and one of the truths that he was speaking that is so far forgotten is that one of the things that Martin Luther King got across that has been lost is this idea that we are not defined by our phenotypes, that we are not to be judged based on our appearance and what our skin color is, or what this or that. But see, this social justice creed The original sin is whiteness and maleness. And you are convicted of this, there's no way out. You know, so they have reversed Martin Luther King's dictum of judging people by the content of their character rather than their by the color of their skin, and they've flipped it entirely. And they're judging us by being male, by being white, by being whatever we are that we can't change. I can't change my color. I can't change my gender, although they say I can. But you know, these are things. This is wrong. This is unjust. You're right. This is unjust, and it's lost the spirit of Martin Luther King, and his entire message has been completely bastardized and inverted.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. We're going to definitely have another do another show if it doesn't sound right, because there's been some individuals saying that the sound doesn't come in right. There's some echo. But I just want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been a great privilege to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much.
You know, one of the things that is that I saw you on Glenn Beck's show, and it was a great interview, and I said, wow, I heard the story, and I had to have you on the On Fire show. And there are a lot of people who we're going to send this out to, who are going to listen to it, because there are people who are probably watching, and I've sent some people that are preachers. I'm going to send them the show. And so they can really have a discussion with possibly with you and I and some other people about the culture of Marxism, about the changes and what can be done to challenge this.
Yes.
You know, I think it was last year, in the city of Houston, there was a young lady. She was a lesbian, and she was on waiting for the bus. And I asked her, you're a female? And she said, no, I'm not a female. And she said, well, you asked her, well, you're not you're a female, you're biological, you're a female. So what do you identify yourself with? She said nothing. She didn't want to identify herself as a female or anything else.
Okay.
And that was kind of disturbing.
That's fine with me as long as they don't try to force it on me. In other words, what's going on here is that I feel that people, if they want to identify as this or that, that's their business. But when they try to force me to agree with it, against my better judgment and my senses and what I know to be true, and force me to lie about my own perceptions, that's a different story.
Wow. Well, we're going to definitely talk about that more in the next show, but I'm going to have you on again, and we're going to see how this sounds. Okay. And I will give you a call probably sometime next week.
Sorry for being so ridiculously dumb about Facebook.
Hey, you know what? The regular, I've had, let me just say something. I've had individuals who are just the toughest time with most of them always have PhDs. I have about 4 or 5 people on with PhDs, and they've had the terrible time coming on. And, the regular ones with just bachelors or just want to talk, they know how to do it.
Well, what it is it's a reverse education, piled higher and deeper, so you're under it, you can't see the forest for the trees. Anime.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll definitely have you on again. Thank you for coming on the show. God bless. And keep in touch. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello out there. This is the On Fire Show with your host, Daryl Brooks. I have NYU professor of global studies, Michael Rectenwald. He came on the show, and it's an exciting show. He talked about cultural Marxism. He talked about his book, Springtime for Snowflakes. That's Michael Rectenwald, NYU professor of global studies. He's talked about his lawsuit. We talked about cultural Marxism, and we're definitely going to be we're going to have him on again because it's important. But I want to let you know about Global TV Now. You can check it out at globaltvnow.com. globaltvnow.com. It's $15 a month. You can download it to your phone and and your television, and it's internet television. You get thousands and thousands of stations all over the world. And so you get sports stations, you get you get sports, you get baseball, NFL networks, Fox Sports, NBA Network, NFL Network. You get prize fighting. You get all types of karate movies, fighting, and it's UFC. So you get all these great channels for only $15 a month. $15 a month. So check out the site globaltvnow.com. We're going to put a link up there. But I'd like to thank Michael Rectenwald for coming on the show, NYU professor of global studies, and his book on Springtime for Snowflakes. We're going to have him on again to talk more in detail of cultural Marxism. And we're going to also have John Robert Corman come on. He is the head of the Constitutional in New Jersey Republicans. He's coming on the show the next couple of days. So we're going to be exciting. We're going to have some great talk shows. We're going to have some great guests that come on the show. And I thank you all for watching. I am tired. Thank you, Kelly. I'm glad it was a good interview for y'all. And it's one of these, it's cold. It's getting cold, so we're staying warm. I'm drinking some good water. This is Daryl McKell Brooks of the On Fire Show. God bless. Peace. Stay strong. Fight against cultural Marxism. Please do. Stand up, stand strong, speak the truth, and always believe in what God is doing for our country. All right? Stand strong, people. This is the On Fire Show. God bless.